I'm a ship captain who survived the first 12 hours of the alien invasion, and this is my story. Before I begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. It was 4:21 a.m. when it happened. I remember checking my watch as I felt the first unusual vibration through the hull. Just another quiet morning watch aboard the container vessel Pacific Trader. We were 3 days out from Singapore, cutting through calm seas under clear stars when the world, as we knew it, suddenly changed forever. I'm Captain Sarah Kwan, 15 years at sea, the last 4 in command of this 10,000 TEU container vessel. I've navigated typhoons in the South China Sea, outrun pirates off Somalia, and managed engine failures in the middle of the Pacific. But nothing in my maritime experience prepared me for the morning when the skies opened up and visitors from another world arrived with devastating purpose. The vibration came first, a low-frequency rumble that seemed to permeate the entire ship. I was on the bridge with my second officer Zhang and helmsman Diaz when the instruments began to malfunction. Radar screens filled with static, GPS coordinates jumped erratically, and the compass swung wildly as if we were passing over some massive magnetic anomaly. Electromagnetic interference? Zhang suggested rebooting the navigation system. Maybe, but I've never seen it affect all systems simultaneously, I replied, trying the backup equipment with no success. Diaz pointed through the bridge windows. Captain, look. The horizon was glowing, not with the approaching dawn still hours away, but with a pulsing blue-green light that seemed to emanate from the ocean itself. As we watched, the water about half a mile ahead began to churn, swirling into a massive vortex that defied all natural explanation. All stop, I ordered. Full reverse. The ship shuddered as the engines reverse thrust, but the momentum of 150,000 deadweight tons doesn't halt quickly. We were being pulled toward the vortex, not by ocean currents, but by some invisible force that seemed to specifically target our vessel. I hit the general alarm, the harsh blaring jolting the off-duty crew from their sleep. All hands to emergency stations. I announced over the PA system, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Secure all cargo and prepare for possible abandonment. First Officer Reyes burst onto the bridge, still pulling on his uniform jacket. Captain, what's happening? Before I could answer, the vortex ahead erupted skyward in a column of seawater and light. The ship pitched violently, throwing us against the consoles. Through the windows, I watched in disbelief as an object emerged from the ocean. Not a submarine, not any human craft, but something vast and geometric, its surface patterned with lights that pulsed in complex sequences. Jesus Christ, Reyes whispered. That's not one of ours. The object, a massive disc-shaped craft roughly the size of a football stadium, rose fully from the ocean and hovered about 50 meters above the surface. Our vessel was now dead in the water, all systems failing simultaneously, even the emergency backup generators. Captain, Zhang's voice was tight with controlled panic. We're getting similar reports from nearby vessels. Singapore Port Control is tracking multiple oceanic emergence events across the South China Sea. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was happening everywhere. Get emergency communications online, I ordered. Satellite phone, radio, anything that still works. We need to establish contact with authorities. As the crew scrambled to follow orders, I assessed our situation. We were effectively adrift, no propulsion, no navigation, carrying 10,000 shipping containers filled with everything from consumer electronics to machinery parts to hazardous materials. We had 47 crew members from 12 different nations, all now looking to me for leadership in a situation no captain's training had ever covered. The alien vessel, because that's clearly what it was, remained stationary, its presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. Then, without warning, it emitted a pulse of energy that swept across our ship. Every electronic device still functioning went dead. Watches stopped. Phones died. Even battery-powered flashlights failed. Yet somehow, the ship's old mechanical systems continued to function. The brass barometer on the bridge wall still worked. The manual compass still pointed north. It seemed the alien technology specifically targeted our electronic infrastructure. Captain, Chief Engineer Santos appeared on the bridge, breathless from running up 8 decks. Whatever that pulse was, it fried everything with a microchip. Even the mechanical systems with electronic components are dead, but the purely mechanical backups are operational. This was significant information. So the auxiliary generator? The one from the 1980s that you were always complaining about? Santos nodded, understanding my line of thinking. The diesel auxiliary with a mechanical governor? It might work. No electronic fuel injection or digital controls. Get it running, I ordered. We need some power, even if it's just for basic lighting and communications. As Santos left to attempt this, I turned to Reyes. Break out the emergency kits. Mechanical sextants, paper charts, analog radio equipment. Anything that might function without modern electronics. You think we can navigate without the GPS? He asked. Sailors crossed oceans for centuries before satellites, I replied. We just need to adapt. Through the bridge windows, I watched as the alien craft began to move, not toward us, but parallel to our position, heading toward the shipping lanes that led to Singapore. In the distance, I could now see more of the same vessels, at least 3 distinct discs silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. The ship's internal phone system, a simple mechanical circuit like those found on old naval vessels, still functioned. It rang sharply, startling everyone on the bridge. Engine room to bridge, came Santos's voice when I answered. Auxiliary generator is online. We have minimal power, enough for essential lighting and the analog radio systems. This was our first piece of good news. Route power to the radio room immediately, and the emergency lighting in the accommodation areas and muster stations. With bare minimal power restored, we established communications using the ship's old high-frequency radio system, technology essentially unchanged since World War II. The news coming in from other vessels and shore stations around the South China Sea painted a grim picture. The oceanic emergence was just the beginning. Within the hour after our encounter, similar vessels appeared in harbors and shipping lanes worldwide. Singapore, Shanghai, Rotterdam, Long Beach, every major port reported the same. Disc-shaped craft rising from the water, neutralizing electronic systems, then deploying smaller craft that began systematic attacks on infrastructure. They're targeting ports and logistics hubs, Reyes observed as we plotted reported attack positions on a paper chart. Crippling global supply chains. I noted the pattern as well, not just logistics. Look at the sequence. They're hitting communication centers, power distribution, water treatment. They're dismantling our infrastructure layer by layer. The radio room reported a transmission from the Singapore Navy, ordering all vessels to avoid ports and maintain position at sea. Military vessels were mobilizing, but with limited effect. The aliens' energy weapons disabled conventional forces with the same ease they had neutralized our electronics. By 7 a.m., slightly less than 3 hours into the event, we had established a clearer picture of what was happening. The invasion appeared coordinated and global, with simultaneous emergence events across Earth's oceans. The pattern suggested meticulous planning and intelligence gathering. They knew exactly where to strike for maximum impact on human civilization. I gathered the senior officers in the ship's conference room, now illuminated by emergency lighting and hurricane lamps. The assembled faces showed a mixture of fear, shock, and determination. Here's what we know, I began, laying out the situation as directly as possible. This is a coordinated global attack by non-human entities. Their technology is far beyond ours, particularly in energy manipulation and electronic disruption. They've neutralized much of our infrastructure and are establishing control of key transportation hubs and resource centers. What do they want? Asked Diaz, the question everyone was thinking. Unknown, I admitted. There have been no attempts at communication that we're aware of. No terms, no ultimatums. Just strategic dismantling of our capabilities. Are they targeting ships specifically? Zhang asked. Should we prepare the lifeboats? I shook my head. Reports indicate they're primarily focusing on fixed infrastructure. Vessels at sea are being disabled, but not directly attacked unless they offer resistance. I pointed to our current position on the chart. We're currently adrift in open ocean, approximately 300 nautical miles from the nearest shoreline. The lifeboats would be a last resort, not a strategic advantage. So what's the plan, Captain? Santos asked. I considered our options carefully. We have 47 crew members, limited provisions for 60 days, a cargo of 10,000 containers with unknown resources, and a partially functional ship with mechanical systems still operating. We're effectively isolated from the chaos on shore while maintaining minimal communications capacity. The implications were clear to the experienced officers around the table. You're suggesting we stay at sea, Reyes stated. For now, I confirmed. We establish contact with other vessels in similar situations, pool information, and assess our collective resources. We adapt our systems to function without electronics and determine if there are vulnerabilities in the alien technology we can exploit. Chief Officer Wong, responsible for cargo operations, spoke up. Captain, I've been reviewing our manifest. We're carrying several containers of older mechanical equipment bound for manufacturing facilities in Vietnam. Parts, tools, even complete assemblies that might function without advanced electronics. This was potentially valuable information. Detail a team to inventory everything we're carrying that might still work. Prioritize communications equipment, power generation, and navigation tools. As the meeting continued, a commotion outside drew our attention. We rushed to the deck to find crew members pointing toward the sky. 3 smaller alien craft, each perhaps the size of a helicopter, had detached from the main vessel and were approaching our ship. Everyone inside, I ordered. No aggressive movements. We watched from the bridge as the alien craft circled the Pacific Trader, scanning with beams of blue-green light that methodically covered every section of the vessel. I forced myself to remain calm, though my heart raced as one of the craft hovered directly outside the bridge windows, its scanning beam passing over us. I could now see the craft clearly. It had no visible seams or joints, appearing to be formed from a single piece of iridescent material that shifted colors subtly as it moved. No obvious weapons, propulsion systems, or entry points were visible, yet it maneuvered with precision that defied our understanding of aerodynamics. The scanning continued for approximately 20 minutes, after which the craft rejoined the main vessel without direct interference. It seemed we were being cataloged rather than attacked, at least for now. By mid-morning, we had established contact with 5 other vessels in similar situations across the South China Sea. 2 container ships, a bulk carrier, an oil tanker, and a research vessel, all adrift with minimal systems functioning. We established a communication schedule using our analog radios, agreeing to share information and resources if possible. The research vessel Horizon provided the most concerning update. Their oceanographic equipment, some of which used older analog technology, had detected unusual activity on the ocean floor. Something was being constructed or deployed across vast areas of the seabed. It's like they're building underwater infrastructure, reported the Horizon's captain. Our sonar shows regular geometric patterns covering several square kilometers, all emanating from the positions where the alien craft first emerged. This suggested the ocean emergence wasn't merely a dramatic entrance. The aliens had been establishing underwater bases, perhaps for some time before revealing themselves. The invasion's first phase might have begun long before any human noticed. Around 11 a.m., approximately 6.5 hours into the event, we observed new behavior from the alien vessels. The larger craft began dispelling smaller units that didn't remain in the vicinity, but instead descended back into the ocean. Through binoculars, I could see these units appeared different from the scanning craft, more angular and equipped with appendages that suggested specialized functions. They're deploying something into the ocean, Reyes observed, watching through his own binoculars. Construction units, maybe? Or resource extraction. His speculation aligned with the Horizon's reports of seabed activity. Whatever the aliens' ultimate purpose, they were methodically implementing it both above and below the ocean surface. The radio room reported a new transmission, This one from a military frequency, still operational using older technology. The message was brief but chilling. Coastal defenses worldwide had fallen to the alien forces. Major cities were experiencing infrastructure collapse, and governments were either going dark or issuing conflicting orders that suggested confusion and panic. More concerning was news about the aliens' apparent attitude toward resistance. Vessels or installations that attempted to fight back were destroyed with immediate, overwhelming force. Those that remained passive were generally left intact, though disabled. It's like they're sorting us, Zhang suggested, separating threats from non-threats, before proceeding with whatever their actual plan is. His assessment made tactical sense. In any invasion scenario, neutralizing resistance before implementing occupation was standard procedure. The question remained, what form would that occupation take? Around noon, Chief Officer Wang returned from his inventory of the cargo with promising news. Among our containers were several crates of mechanical navigation equipment bound for a maritime academy in Vietnam, including sextants, chronometers, and other traditional tools. Another container held mechanical water pumps and filtration systems designed for rural applications without reliable electricity. Most valuable was a container of amateur radio equipment, including several tube-based setups that might function despite the electronic disruption. Santos, who had experience with such systems from his hobby interests, believed he could get at least one operational using parts from our auxiliary systems. It won't have a range of our satellite communications, he cautioned, but we might establish more reliable contact with other vessels and possibly shore stations using older technology. I authorized him to proceed, grateful for the coincidence of carrying such equipment. Though not coincidence perhaps, this shipping lane regularly transported goods to regions with less developed infrastructure, where mechanical reliability often took precedence over electronic sophistication. By early afternoon, we had adapted to our new circumstances with the efficiency typical of a well-trained merchant crew. Watch rotations were maintained. Our position was tracked using celestial navigation, and systems were modified to function without electronic components. The crew, though understandably anxious, responded to the structure and purpose provided by their duties. The galley had adjusted to cooking without electronic equipment, using the diesel stoves designed for emergency situations. The resulting meal was basic but hot, and I made sure to eat with the crew, moving between mess rooms to maintain visibility and answer questions directly. "Captain," asked one of the engineering cadets during lunch, "do you think they'll come for us next?" The directness of the question caused conversations around us to halt as crew members awaited my response. I chose my words carefully, aware that false reassurance would undermine trust, but unfiltered pessimism would damage morale. Based on observed patterns, they appear focused on securing strategic infrastructure rather than pursuing isolated vessels, I answered. That said, we're preparing for all scenarios, including direct contact. Our best strategy remains adaptation and information gathering. My radio officer interrupted with an urgent message. The amateur radio setup was operational, and we were receiving transmissions from a broader range of sources, including some inland stations using older equipment. The new information painted an even grimmer picture. The aliens had established control of major coastal cities worldwide, their technology systematically disabling modern infrastructure while preserving older systems, much as they had done to our vessel. Human military responses had proven largely ineffective, their electronic systems rendered useless against the advanced technology. More ominously, reports were coming in of human processing in occupied areas. Civilians were being gathered and subjected to some form of scanning or assessment, after which they were separated into groups for unknown purposes. Some were returned to specific work functions, others transported to alien facilities established in former industrial zones. They're reorganizing human society, Reyes observed as we processed this information. Not eliminating us, but restructuring according to some alien logic. The implications were disturbing. This wasn't just an invasion. It was colonization with humans apparently being categorized for roles within the new order. Around 3 p.m., approximately 10.5 hours into the event, we observed a significant increase in alien activity. More craft emerged from the main vessel, some heading toward the horizon, others descending into the ocean. The water around us began to glow with the same blue-green light we'd observed during the initial emergence. Scan the water, see if anything's getting close to the ship, I ordered, joining Zhang at the rail with binoculars. Through magnification, I could see objects moving beneath the surface, following geometric patterns that suggested coordinated activity rather than natural marine movement. Occasionally, one would rise close enough to the surface to be partially visible, revealing angular constructions that resembled neither sea life nor human submarines. "They're building something," Zhang said, voicing my own conclusion, using the ocean as a base of operations. The strategic logic was sound. Earth's oceans covered over 70% of the planet's surface, mostly unmonitored and unclaimed by human governments. An invasion force could establish massive infrastructure there with minimal resistance, especially if they possessed technology adapted to aquatic environments. As we watched this underwater activity, Santos called from the radio room with urgent news. He had established contact with a submarine, an older diesel-electric model that had been participating in naval exercises when the invasion began. Being submerged and operating primarily mechanical systems had apparently protected it from the initial electronic disruption. The submarine commander reported observing similar underwater construction across vast areas of the ocean floor. More concerning, they had detected what appeared to be systematic extraction operations targeting specific underwater resources, particularly rare earth minerals from deep-sea deposits. "They're mining the ocean floor," Santos explained, relaying the submarine's observations, "extracting materials at a rate that should be impossible with our technology." This suggested a resource motivation for the invasion, which aligned with historical human patterns where technologically advanced societies exploited resources from less developed regions. The difference was the extreme technological gap between our civilizations, making our most advanced capabilities appear primitive by comparison. By late afternoon, we had established communication with 17 vessels across the South China Sea, creating an informal network of stranded ships sharing information and coordinating potential responses. Most reported similar experiences: disabled electronics, alien scanning of their vessels, and subsequent monitoring without direct interference. Through this network, we learned that ships that had attempted to restore full electronic systems had immediately received focused attention from the alien craft, resulting in more comprehensive disabling or, in one case, the removal of specific crew members who had been leading the electronic restoration effort. They're allowing mechanical technology, but actively suppressing electronic capabilities beyond a certain level, I concluded during a meeting with my officers. The question is why? Control, suggested Reyes. Modern electronics create interconnected systems they can't easily monitor or manage. Mechanical systems are isolated, predictable. Or maybe electronic systems interfere with whatever they're establishing, added Wang, like radio frequency interference with sensitive equipment. Both theories had merit, and both informed our strategy moving forward. We would continue developing our mechanical capabilities while carefully avoiding electronic restoration that might trigger alien intervention. As the day progressed, the amateur radio network brought increasingly organized information from resistant groups on shore. Universities, amateur radio clubs, and historical technology preservation societies had become unlikely centers of human coordination, their older equipment still functional while modern infrastructure collapsed. Through these channels, we learned more about the aliens' behavior pattern in occupied areas. They appeared to be establishing a tiered system, with humans categorized and assigned to specific functions based on criteria that remained unclear. Those with technical skills related to resource extraction and processing received preferential treatment, suggesting the invasion had specific material objectives rather than being purely territorial or genocidal. Most concerning were reports of humans being subjected to what appeared to be biological sampling, with particular interest shown in genetic diversity. The purpose remained unknown, but historical precedents from human colonization suggested troubling possibilities, from medical experimentation to selective breeding programs. Around 5 p.m., 11 hours into the event, we observed a new development. The main alien vessel began emitting a different energy pattern, a pulsing red light that spread outward in concentric circles. As this energy wave passed over our ship, the few electronic systems we had managed to partially repair failed again, but now some crew members reported symptoms, including headaches, nausea, and visual disturbances. Some kind of radiation, suggested Dr. Patel, our medical officer, as he distributed analgesics to affected crew members. Or perhaps electromagnetic frequencies that interact with our nervous systems. Whatever it was, the effects were temporary, subsiding within 20 minutes as the red energy dissipated. But the implications were disturbing. The aliens were deploying technology that could potentially affect human biology directly, not just our infrastructure. This development accelerated my planning process. While we had been relatively safe thus far, remaining passive observers, the situation could change rapidly if the aliens began targeting humans directly rather than just our technology. I gathered my senior officers for a strategy session focused on longer-term survival. We need to prepare for extended isolation, I began. That means sustainable systems for water, food, and essential operations that can function indefinitely without shore support. Santos outlined a plan for converting part of our auxiliary machinery to produce distilled water from seawater using purely mechanical methods. Wong calculated our food supplies could last 3 months at full rations, longer if we implemented rationing. Patel addressed medical concerns, noting that while we had adequate supplies for routine needs, any major illness or injury would be problematic without access to shore facilities. Reyes raised the critical question, what about fuel? The auxiliary generator won't run forever, even with minimal loading. This was indeed our most pressing limitation. Without power, even our minimal lighting and communication systems would fail. I turned to Santos. Options. The chief engineer considered carefully. We're carrying some solar panels in the cargo, intended for a rural electrification project. They're basic models, not the computerized smart panels that would be affected by the disruption. If we could configure a simple mechanical voltage regulator, we might establish a minimal power generation system independent of fuel supplies. This was a promising direction, and I authorized him to begin working on the concept immediately. If successful, it would address our most critical vulnerability. As our meeting concluded, the radio room reported a transmission from another vessel that had made a disturbing discovery. The tanker Petromax, carrying crude oil from Middle Eastern fields, had found an alien device attached to their hull below the waterline. When carefully examined using mechanical tools, it appeared to be some kind of monitoring or tracking technology. Check our hull, I ordered immediately. Full inspection, particularly areas below the waterline that would be accessible during their scanning operations. The inspection team reported back within the hour. We too had been tagged, with 3 small devices attached at strategic points along our hull. They were unlike any human technology, seeming to bond molecularly with the ship's steel rather than being mechanically attached. Their purpose was unclear, but the most likely explanation was tracking or monitoring. Should we remove them? Asked the chief mate. I considered the potential consequences carefully. Not yet. If they're monitoring devices, removing them might signal active resistance, which has triggered aggressive responses in other encounters. Leave them in place while we gather more information. This decision, though tactically sound, felt like a surrender of sorts. We were accepting alien surveillance, a direct intrusion on our vessel's integrity. Yet pragmatism had to override pride. We were in no position to challenge their technological superiority directly. As evening approached, bringing us near the 12-hour mark since the initial contact, I stood on the bridge wing watching the alien vessels continue their methodical activities. The main craft remained positioned about 2 miles from our vessel, pulsing with complex light patterns that suggested intense internal operations. The smaller craft continued their oceanic deployments, creating a steadily expanding network of whatever underwater infrastructure they were establishing. The radio network had grown to include over 40 vessels across the South China Sea and adjacent waters, creating an impromptu maritime community of stranded ships. Through coordinated communication schedules and relay operations, we were establishing a clearer picture of the invasion's progress and patterns. What emerged was a methodical occupation rather than chaotic destruction. The aliens were systematically establishing control over key resources, reorganizing human populations according to some classification system, and building infrastructure for what appeared to be long-term presence. This was not a raid, but colonization, with humans being incorporated as a managed species within a new dominant paradigm. Just before the 12-hour mark, at 4:15 p.m., we received our first direct communication from the aliens. It came not through conventional radio signals, but as a projected holographic image that appeared suddenly on the bridge, startling the watch officers. The image showed complex geometric patterns that shifted and reformed, accompanied by sounds unlike any human language. After approximately 30 seconds of this incomprehensible display, it shifted to English text that scrolled across the projection. Attention Vessel Pacific Trader Registration confirmed classification. Resource Transport Current Status. Non-hostile directive. Maintain position compliance ensures continued autonomous operation resistance results in direct management message repeats. The message cycled 3 times before the projection disappeared, leaving the bridge crew staring at the empty space where it had appeared. They know our vessel name, Zhang noted, stating the obvious but significant fact. And they're communicating in our language. More important was the content of the message itself. We were being classified, just like the humans in occupied coastal areas, but as a vessel rather than individuals. We were being granted autonomous operation, conditional on compliance with their positioning directive. They're treating us like a resource, Reyes observed. Not as a threat or even as individuals, just a useful object to be cataloged and managed. The impersonal nature of the communication was perhaps more disturbing than overt hostility would have been. There was no acknowledgement of our humanity, our sovereignty, or our right to self-determination. We were simply assets to be classified and directed. Yet within this cold assessment was a potential advantage. If they viewed us as a resource rather than a threat, we might maintain a degree of autonomy that could serve longer-term human interests. Not through direct resistance, which would clearly trigger direct management, but through strategic adaptation that preserved our capabilities while appearing to comply. I gathered the crew to share this development, being transparent about both the communication and my interpretation of it. We're being monitored, but not immediately threatened, I explained. They're establishing a management system that classifies and directs resources, including vessels like ours. So we just sit here and take orders? Asked one of the engineers, frustration evident in his voice. We appear to comply while gathering information and developing our capabilities, I clarified. This isn't surrender, it's tactical patience. We're 47 humans on a single vessel, facing a technologically superior force that's established global dominance in less than 12 hours. Direct resistance would be futile, but strategic adaptation preserves options for the future. The crew absorbed this, some nodding in reluctant agreement, others clearly struggling with the implications. I didn't blame them. Sailors are accustomed to facing nature's challenges, mechanical failures, even human threats like pirates. An alien occupation requiring indefinite compliance with non-human authority was outside any scenario we had been trained to handle. As the 12-hour mark arrived, bringing us to 4:21 p.m., I stood on the bridge looking out at the alien vessel still hovering above the ocean surface. In half a day, human civilization had been fundamentally altered, our technological infrastructure crippled, our governments disrupted, our population being reorganized according to alien priorities. Yet we had survived, adapted, and begun to understand the new reality facing us. The Pacific Trader had become part of an impromptu maritime network, sharing information and resources among vessels similarly stranded by the invasion. We were developing sustainable systems for water, power, and communications using older technologies that remained functional. And perhaps most importantly, we were learning the patterns and priorities of our new overseers, knowledge that might eventually reveal vulnerabilities or opportunities. Just after sunset, approximately 14 hours into the invasion, we received another transmission through our amateur radio network that changed our understanding of the situation. A research vessel near the Philippines had been monitoring oceanic temperatures and chemical composition when they detected something significant. Areas where the aliens were most active showed dramatic changes in water chemistry, with previously unknown compounds appearing in increasing concentrations. They're terraforming the oceans, the research vessel's chief scientist explained through the crackling radio connection, adjusting the chemical composition to suit their own biological requirements. This revelation shed new light on their emergence from water rather than from space, as most fictional accounts of alien invasion had imagined. They weren't visitors merely arriving from another world. They were colonizers preparing to transform our world into something that better suited their needs. I called an immediate meeting of my senior officers to discuss this development. If they're changing the ocean chemistry, Dr. Patel noted, there will be catastrophic effects on marine ecosystems. Coral bleaching, fish die-offs, disruption of the entire food chain. And eventually atmospheric effects, added Zhang, who had studied environmental science before becoming a maritime officer. The oceans regulate our climate, absorb carbon dioxide, generate oxygen through phytoplankton. If they fundamentally alter ocean chemistry, he didn't need to finish. We all understood the implications. This wasn't just an invasion of our technologies and social structures. It was a biological reshaping of Earth itself, with humanity's survival as just one variable in their calculations. This information gave new urgency to our planning. We weren't merely facing an occupation, but a comprehensive transformation of our planet that might eventually make it uninhabitable for humans, even if we survived the initial invasion. We need to confirm this independently, I decided. We're carrying scientific equipment in some of the containers. Find anything that can test water composition and deploy it immediately. Wong led a team to locate suitable equipment among our cargo, eventually finding water testing kits intended for agricultural use in Vietnam. They were basic, but could detect major chemical changes if they were occurring in our vicinity. The results came back within hours and confirmed our fears. The ocean around us showed significant alterations in pH, salinity, and the presence of compounds not found in normal seawater. The changes were still relatively minor in our location, but the pattern matched what the research vessel had reported from areas with more extensive alien activity. How quickly could they change the entire ocean? Reyes asked during our follow-up briefing. The Earth's oceans contain approximately 1.35 billion cubic kilometers of water, Zhang calculated. Even with advanced technology, altering that volume would take considerable time and energy. Unless they're using some kind of catalytic process, Wong suggested. Something that spreads and self-replicates, like introducing a new microorganism designed to transform the chemistry. The possibility couldn't be dismissed. We'd already seen technology beyond our understanding. Biological engineering might be equally advanced. Around midnight, 8 hours into the invasion, we observed a new pattern of activity from the alien craft. The main vessel descended partially back into the ocean, its upper section remaining visible while the lower portion submerged. The smaller craft began moving in complex patterns around it, creating what appeared to be a defensive perimeter. Through our amateur radio network, we learned that similar behavior was being observed at alien emergence sites worldwide. Something significant was happening, some new phase of their operation beginning. Captain, the radio operator called from his station. We're receiving a new type of transmission, not directed at us specifically, but broadcasting on multiple frequencies. I joined him at the radio, listening to the strange pulsing tones that seemed to contain patterns just beyond human comprehension. After several minutes, these gave way to a voice speaking in accented but clear English. Attention, Earth inhabitants. Your planet is now under protection of the collective. Resistance has been noted and is counterproductive. Your technological development path was leading toward ecosystem collapse. Intervention was necessary. Comply with local directives. Adaptation protocols will enable continued existence of human species within modified environmental parameters. Non-compliance will result in classification as ecosystem contaminant. The message repeated in several languages, then returned to the incomprehensible pulsing tones. Protection. Santos said incredulously, "They call this protection? From their perspective, maybe it is," I replied, processing the implications of the message. They're positioning themselves as intervening to prevent ecosystem collapse. They see our technology as the threat, not themselves. So they're what, environmental extremists from space? Diaz asked. Not exactly, I said slowly, thinking through the logic. More like gardeners finding a plot overrun with a potentially destructive species. They're not exterminating us. They're containing and managing us while they restore what they consider proper balance. This framing of the invasion, not as conquest, but as ecological intervention, was somehow more disturbing than simple aggression would have been. It suggested a moral certainty, a conviction that their actions were not just strategic, but righteous. I returned to the bridge, needing time to process this development. Through the windows, I could see the partially submerged alien craft, its lights pulsing beneath the water's surface, creating eerie patterns that reflected across the waves. Around our vessel, the ocean continued its unnatural glow, evidence of whatever transformative process was being introduced to Earth's waters. Officer Zhang joined me, his expression somber. If they're altering the oceans and atmosphere to suit themselves, where does that leave us? Adapted or extinct, I replied grimly. Their message mentioned adaptation protocols for humans. Whatever that means. We stood in silence, contemplating a future where humanity might be genetically modified to survive in an alien-engineered environment. The moral and existential implications were staggering. The radio officer interrupted with urgent news. One of the vessels in our network, a fishing trawler about 60 miles southeast, reported being boarded by smaller alien craft. Unlike previous scanning operations, this appeared to be a direct intervention. Communication cut off mid-transmission. Try to re-establish contact, I ordered, and alert all vessels in the network to be prepared for similar actions. For the next hour, we monitored the situation tensely, receiving scattered reports of similar boardings across our improvised network. Vessels weren't being destroyed or their crews harmed, but something was being installed or modified on each ship. They're implementing the next phase, Reyes assessed, whatever that involves. At approximately 2:30 a.m., 10 hours into the invasion, we observed 3 of the smaller alien craft detaching from the main vessel and heading directly toward the Pacific Trader. There was no point attempting evasion. We remained dead in the water, our modern propulsion systems disabled. All hands to boarding stations, I announced over the manual PA system. No resistant postures, no weapons. I repeat, non-resistant posture only. The alien craft surrounded our vessel, taking positions at the bow, midships, and stern. Unlike the earlier scanning operation, they now extended what appeared to be docking apparatus, making physical contact with our hull. The vibration of mechanical interaction resonated throughout the ship. I stationed myself on the main deck with Reyes and Dr. Patel, watching as a section of the alien craft's seamless hull reconfigured itself, forming an opening from which emerged something. Not humanoid, not even remotely anthropomorphic. The alien forms resembled nothing so much as large cephalopods, with multiple manipulating appendages radiating from a central body that pulsed with internal bioluminescence. They moved with fluid grace, propelling themselves from their craft onto our deck without apparent mechanical assistance, as if the difference between water and air were insignificant to their locomotion. 3 of the beings approached us, their skin shifting colors in patterns that might have been communication or emotional expression. Up close, I could see they possessed sensory clusters that might be analogous to eyes, though with no recognizable facial structure to orient them. Dr. Patel inhaled sharply beside me. Oceanic evolutionary path, she whispered. "They evolved in water, not on land." The observation made immediate sense. Their entire invasion had centered on water, emerging from the oceans, transforming ocean chemistry. They weren't adapting to Earth's environment. They were recreating their home environment here. One of the aliens extended an appendage that held a device unlike any human technology. It emitted the same blue-green light we'd observed earlier, scanning each of us systematically. I forced myself to stand firm, fighting every instinct to retreat from this utterly inhuman presence. The creature's appendage hovered near my face, the scanning light intensifying. I felt a tingling sensation, then a momentary sharp pain as something extracted what felt like a small sample of tissue from my cheek. Around me, I was aware of similar sampling occurring with other crew members who had gathered on deck. No one resisted, following my orders, though the fear was palpable. The aliens moved through our ship with purpose, installing devices at key structural points and intersection nodes. Unlike the earlier monitoring tags on our hull, these devices integrated more deeply with the vessel, pulsing with the same bioluminescent light as the aliens themselves. One device was placed in the bridge, another in the engine room, and a third in the crew accommodation area. Each appeared to establish itself, tendrils extending into the ship's structure in ways that defied normal physical properties. The entire process took approximately 40 minutes, during which no attempt at communication occurred beyond the initial scanning. The aliens worked with methodical efficiency, ignoring our presence except when we were directly in their path. When they had finished, they returned to their craft, without ceremony. The openings in their vessels sealed seamlessly, and they detached from our hull, returning to the main craft in perfect coordination. "What did they do to us?" asked one of the younger crew members, voicing the question everyone was thinking. I approached one of the installed devices cautiously, examining it without touching. Some kind of monitoring or control system, I assessed. Similar to the hull tags, but more integrated with the ship's systems. Santos reported from the engine room that the device installed there appeared to be interfacing with our propulsion systems, though how this was possible when most electronics remained non-functional was unclear. "Maybe they're preparing us for something," suggested Reyes, adapting our vessel to function in their transformed environment. As if confirming his theory, the main engines suddenly hummed to life, not through our control systems, but apparently activated by the alien technology now integrated with our ship. The navigation displays on the bridge remained dark, but the vessel began moving under external control, turning to a heading of 057 degrees and accelerating to approximately 10 knots. "We're being redirected," I noted, checking our position against the paper charts. The new heading would take us toward a region where we had observed particularly intense alien activity. Through our amateur radio network, we learned that other vessels were experiencing similar remote activation and redirection. We were being gathered, herded like livestock to designated areas for some unknown purpose. I gathered my officers on the bridge, maintaining outward calm despite the disturbing loss of control over our vessel. "We're being taken somewhere," I stated the obvious. "We need to prepare for whatever happens when we arrive." "Resistance is futile at this point," Reyes observed. "They've demonstrated complete technological superiority and now have direct control of our vessel." "Not resistance," I clarified. "Preparation. Understanding. We gather every piece of information, identify patterns, look for any potential leverage, however small." Over the next 2 hours, as our ship continued its controlled journey, we maintained communication with other redirected vessels, triangulating our positions to determine our collective destination. The pattern became clear. We were being gathered in a roughly circular formation around a central point where intense alien activity had been observed. By 4 a.m., 12 hours since the initial contact, the Pacific Trader had reached its designated position and stopped. Through binoculars, I could see dozens of other vessels similarly positioned, creating a vast floating ring around what appeared to be a massive construction rising from the ocean surface. The structure defied conventional architectural principles, combining geometric precision with organic elements that seemed to pulse and flow. It extended both above and below the waterline, with a submerged portion glowing with that now familiar blue-green light. "It's a processing facility," suggested Wong after studying it through the ship's telescope. "Look at the flow patterns, the intake structures. They're processing seawater on an industrial scale." This aligned with our earlier observations about ocean chemistry alterations. The facility appeared designed to accelerate whatever transformative process they had initiated. As dawn broke on the horizon, casting first light on this alien installation surrounded by captured human vessels, I stood on the bridge wing contemplating our situation. The past 12 hours had transformed everything, rewriting humanity's understanding of our place in the universe and our future on our own planet. I had no illusions about our situation. We were facing an adversary whose technology and capabilities far exceeded our own, whose purposes remained largely opaque, and whose attitude toward humanity appeared coldly utilitarian at best. The coming days, weeks, and perhaps years would challenge us in ways no maritime training had prepared us for. But as I watched the sunrise illuminate both the alien structure and the ring of human vessels surrounding it, I felt a resolute determination. Humans have faced existential challenges throughout our history, plagues, wars, natural disasters, and found ways to endure, adapt, and eventually reclaim our agency. This crisis, though unprecedented in scale and origin, would ultimately test the same fundamental human qualities: resilience, ingenuity, and the stubborn refusal to surrender our essential nature even when all external circumstances have changed. The aliens might have superior technology, but they were encountering a species that had survived and thrived through countless catastrophes by constantly adapting and overcoming. Whether they recognized that aspect of humanity remained to be seen. But as the first 12 hours of this new era came to a close, I silently affirmed that they would learn it eventually. The invasion had begun, but the story of human response was just beginning to unfold. I turned to my officers gathered on the bridge, their faces showing exhaustion but also determination. "Log this," I instructed the officer keeping our manual records. 4:21 a.m., 12 hours since first contact. Pacific Trader holding position as directed by non-human entities. Crew intact. Vessel under external control, but habitable. Beginning adaptation to new operational realities while maintaining human agency to maximum extent possible. It was a simple log entry, factual and measured. But between the lines lay our commitment to what would become the defining human challenge of our time: finding ways to preserve our humanity in a world being remade by decidedly inhuman forces. The ocean around us might change, our technologies might fail, even our physical environment might be transformed beyond recognition. But who we were, the essential qualities that defined us as humans and as sailors, that we would fight to maintain, regardless of what changes these ocean-born invaders might impose. The log entry completed, I assigned watch rotations, organized survey teams to document the alien facility's operations, and established communication protocols with our vessel network. There was work to be done, information to gather, plans to make. The invasion had arrived with overwhelming force, but the resistance, subtle, strategic, and distinctly human, was just beginning. I am Captain Sarah Kwan of the container vessel Pacific Trader, and I survived the first 12 hours of the alien invasion. This is where my story begins, not where it ends.